super excited to introduce Christopher Nash, a staff researcher and democratization specialist who has developed successful democratization programs at both Airtable and Dropbox. He'll share some of the most important lessons learned from his time scaling research.
Hello, and thanks for joining. My name is Christopher Nash. I go by Nash, and I want to share with you some lessons learned from my work scaling research at both Dropbox and Airtable. First, just a little bit about me. I've been working in research for nearly 20 years. I started my career as a research coordinator and then as an agency researcher. And after I went in-house, I worked as an embedded researcher and a research manager at different times. But in the last few years, I've been focused on scaling or democratizing research. And I created democratization programs at both Dropbox and Airtable. Now, every company is a little bit of a snowflake. Research looks different everywhere, and democratization is going to be different as well. So the environment you are working in may be very different from mine. So I want to provide you some context. Both Dropbox and Airtable actually had very similar programs. They both had medium-sized research teams, 20 to 30 researchers and research ops professionals, relatively high research maturity at both companies, and both teams were very well funded and well resourced at the time. But you may be the only researcher at your company, or maybe your company doesn't have any researchers at all. If that's the case, your solutions are probably going to look very different from mine, but I hope that my experience will still be instructive for you. So I want to give a brief overview of what I mean when I talk about democratization. A lot of folks hear democratization and they assume that we're just going to give everybody in the company a Maze account or a user testing login and call it a day. But that is not at all what I mean when I talk about a research democratization program. Democratization is not research anarchy. Democratization is about creating and nurturing a culture of learning at your company. It's about responsibly scaling the practice of research beyond the core research team. And responsible democratization requires a well-resourced and intentional program that provides guidance, guardrails, and oversight. I'm not going to go into all the details of how to create a democratization program today. I've written about that before, and you can find links to those articles on my LinkedIn. But I will just briefly go over what I mean by guidance, guardrails, and oversight. And then I'll move on to sharing some of the lessons that I've learned from doing this work at 2 companies so far. By guidance, I mean basic research education. Creating a culture of learning at a company does not mean that you're trying to turn everyone there into a career researcher. So this education can be quite targeted. You don't need to go deep on theory. Just cover the material that your partners need to know in order to conduct the specific kind of study that they need. I also recommend making your educational materials modular. Break up your resources so that there are small pieces that folks can consume right before they do something. You don't want to overwhelm them with one giant document or course. Also, provide templates for everything. Research plan, discussion guides, screeners, findings write-ups, anything, any deliverable at all. Make sure folks have a template that they can start from. And then there's always a question about static resources versus live resources. I've chosen to focus on static resources primarily that partners can consume on their own time. I don't want to do a lot of live workshop trainings because turnover, frankly, is just too pervasive in the tech industry. And I don't want to spend a lot of time and energy on live workshops with folks who are just going to leave the company in a few months. However, live workshops can be really effective. They can play a role. It just depends on what feels most appropriate in your company context. So guardrails are the policies, procedures, and tools that facilitate your program. This is about creating an intentional program and providing a safe infrastructure that your partners can rely on. So as you design this infrastructure, you want to look for opportunities to minimize risks to your participants and to your company. So for example, what kinds of research will you support partners in doing, and what kinds of research will you reserve for professional researchers? In my opinion, evaluative research is the sweet spot for democratization. You can read more about why I say that in my articles on LinkedIn. But I firmly believe democratization should really focus on evaluative work. You'll need policies in place to protect participant privacy and to protect your company's trade secrets as well. And then there's recruiting. Who are partners allowed to talk to? How will they reach those participants? How do folks get access to research tools? What tools are they allowed to use? Many tools have guardrails built into them that can be very helpful to promote oversight as well. And what I mean by oversight is a close partnership with professional researchers. So the bulk of what I do really is just one-on-one consulting, helping folks define their projects, hone their research questions, select the right methodologies, etc. And I give detailed feedback on all deliverables, research plans, discussion guides, etc. And to operationalize this, it's helpful to build checkpoints into your process where partners have to seek feedback in order to move on to the next step or to get access to the next tool. So as I said before, check my LinkedIn for several articles on democratization, including a detailed description of the program that I built at Dropbox. Now, on to some lessons learned. First off, dedicate a head count to democratization. Responsible democratization is a full-time job. Hire someone exclusively to run your democratization program. This is not something that you can just put on top of the backs of the researchers that you already have. I know that not all companies will be in a position to make a dedicated hire for this, but if it is at all feasible, it is absolutely worth doing. One benefit that you'll see with a dedicated hire is that they will have a pretty open schedule. Embedded researchers spend a lot of time in team meetings. Without that burden, I was able to be much more responsive. So when those urgent usability tests came up that needed to be done before this imminent launch, I was able to respond and help folks right away in a way that an embedded researcher just would not be able to do without abandoning the work they were already working on. Being a dedicated democratization person also left me open to help folks in other parts of the company, like marketing, customer support, internal research efforts. I was able to help folks beyond just the product development teams. You also want to make sure that you're hiring someone here who is an experienced researcher for this role. The most important thing this position will do is to share their experience and expertise doing professional research. So democratization programs are often associated with the research ops teams, and that's fine, but you want to hire an experienced researcher to play this consulting role. Next up, pilot everything. You don't have to launch a full-fledged program all at once. Start small. Offer one type of study to begin with. You might start by offering just unmoderated usability testing, for example. Or you might pick just one research-friendly team to work with first before opening up to the entire department or an entire company. So start small and expand your program as you learn. Also know that you will have to market the program. Building it does not mean that they will come. I was often surprised how often people would say to me that they had not heard of my program. When I asked for feedback at the end of projects, lots of times folks would say, hey, this was fantastic, but I don't think anybody else knows they can do this. So you will need to publicize your program. Do that in every communication channel you can think of, and do it on a regular cadence. Doing it once will not be enough. Once you've got a couple of projects under your belt, develop a case study or two. Those can be really persuasive and helping get more traction for your program. Next up, win middle managers early. You don't want to let middle managers become a barrier, and they easily can. So even if you've convinced your individual designers that they should do research, their managers may not want them to spend their time that way, or they may question why their designers should be doing a researcher's job. So you're going to need those managers on your side to encourage and to make time for their reports to take on research projects. So do a roadshow early to make sure that managers understand the value of the program and that they understand what will be expected of their team members who do participate. Don't underestimate recruiting. Recruiting really, I think, was the biggest difference between scaling research at Dropbox and at Airtable. At Dropbox, I was able to consult on about twice as many projects per year as I was at Airtable. And I think the biggest reason for that was differences in recruiting. So first off, I mean, there are just huge differences in consumer versus enterprise recruiting generally. But also just the reach of the company. So at Dropbox, something like 18% of Americans have a Dropbox account. So users were really easy to find in like any public panel. But at Airtable, the customer base was much smaller, and stakeholders mostly wanted to talk to people who were building Airtable bases, not just users, which also limited the pool even further. And a large portion of our customers were on corporate accounts, and so we had to go through account managers in order to talk to them at all. So all of that added up to recruiting just being a much bigger burden at Airtable than it was at Dropbox. If participants are not easy to recruit in your environment, you might consider spending your energy shoring up your research ops and your recruiting infrastructure before you try to scale a democratization program. It would certainly help you in the end. Good feedback, I found, was just the best educational tool for helping folks really grok research concepts. So you can offer general guidelines in your educational materials, but people really learn best when they can see knowledge applied to a real world problem. So I always provide people with templates to get them started, but then I let those partners write their first drafts of research plans, discussion guides on their own. And then I offer thorough feedback on those, including really detailed wordsmithing. And I'm also always sure to explain why I'm suggesting the changes that I am. So to use like a rudimentary example, think about leading questions. You can tell people what a leading question is in your educational materials, but when you can apply that concept directly to their project, it drives the lesson home in a different way. So you can explain to someone that they should ask, how do you feel about this? Instead of asking, do you like this? And explaining why that's important really helps drive the lesson home better than just an abstract description of what a leading question is. So moments like this were when I really saw light bulbs going off for people. That detailed feedback, including the why, was just the most effective way I found to help people internalize research concepts. And then bonus here, you also get to learn a lot about your partner's skills by letting them do that first draft. So I could see based on how they drafted questions, how much oversight and attention they might need from me going forward. Timing is going to be a challenge. Research always takes longer than our stakeholders expect or that they want it to, and that's going to be especially true if they are conducting research themselves. I think the only negative feedback my programs ever got was about the process just taking too long or taking longer than partners expected. So be sure to set realistic expectations at the beginning of every engagement. You can put a note at the top of your educational resources to state like approximately how long that step should take. And remember, your partners already have full-time jobs. They are fitting this research project into the cracks in their already busy schedules. They aren't being researchers all day, every day. So their projects are probably going to take longer, and they're going to need help estimating how long the process should take. I also found documentation to be a surprising challenge. Researchers' primary output is the research report. We live and die by those reports that we produce. But getting our partners to write up their findings was like pulling teeth. I found that when a partner does research, they don't care about the report. They only care about getting more data, making the decision, and moving that development forward. So, they just didn't want to spend time writing anything up. But documentation is important in democratized projects. Not for the same reasons that they are for researchers. Researchers write reports to socialize important insights far and wide throughout the company. But your partners are probably working on very tactical research projects, and their insights probably are not going to be applicable beyond their immediate project or their immediate team. But teams do need to be able to show why they made the decisions that they did, and we don't want those teams having to repeat research because concepts were not documented. So the advice that I give to teams is to write for the new member of your team that's going to join in 6 weeks. So you want that new team member to understand why you made the product decisions that you did and make sure that no one has to repeat your research project. You also have an opportunity with your template to give them some help here. The template that you provide for a findings document can be exceedingly simple. They don't need to write a novel, just what we did, who we talked to, what we learned. You're also going to need to document your program's impact. You never know when your leadership is going to change or resourcing suddenly gets tight and you have to justify your program. I had a thriving program at Dropbox when we got a new research leader. and all the support and goodwill that I had enjoyed with the previous leadership was suddenly gone. I really had to advocate for the program. And unfortunately, the only statistic I could show was the number of projects I had consulted on, and that just, didn't convey impact very effectively. So when I got to Airtable, I made documentation a priority from day one. At the beginning of every engagement, I had partners spell out the specific product decisions they wanted to inform with their research project. And then after the project was over, I asked them to document what decisions they had actually made and what role the research played in making that decision. So over time, you'll end up with being able to show not just how many projects you've done, but how many product decisions your program has influenced. Also, don't overlook the marketing team. At least in the companies that I worked in, market research functioned very differently than UX research. The market research teams relied on vendors a lot more, and they actually did very little of the actual research in-house. So that meant that they weren't going to engage a vendor to test every paragraph of copy that people write or, every simple change that they make to a landing page. And that left a significant gap for iterative messaging testing. And the democratization programs were perfect for this. They can be used to test messaging, images, landing pages, etc. And product marketing managers that I worked with loved being able to observe users' reactions to their writing and enabled them to improve their marketing materials iteratively before launch, just like we would do when developing a product. And they loved that. Lastly, I'd like to share a couple of sort of surprising benefits that we saw from my democratization efforts. So because I was a dedicated full-time to democratization, I had the time to help folks outside of the usual development teams. All researchers have probably had this experience of getting an internal survey from the HR team or the security team, and you're just mortified by the poor quality of the questions in those surveys sometimes. So, being a dedicated resource, I was able to help several teams improve their internal data collection efforts as well. Another example, at Airtable, when a customer support specialist completed an engagement with a customer, they would ask them a single survey question to gauge the customer satisfaction, but they were getting really muddy data. And I was able to help them make just a simple language change, which really vastly improved the relevance and the specificity of the feedback they were getting. And then secondly, researchers who are new to the concept of democratization, they often worry that we're just going to give away their jobs. There's this fear that if we teach folks to do their own research, they aren't going to need professional researchers anymore. And in my experience, the truth, it really is quite the opposite. Nearly every partner I engaged with at some point during the process would say some version of, I have so much more respect now for what your team does. When these partners engage with a robust democratization program, they get to see firsthand just how much work and expertise goes into producing rigorous research. And when they see that, they know that they aren't qualified to do it on their own without our guidance. So that's everything I wanted to share with you today. Please do find me on LinkedIn. My name is Christopher Nash, and I would love to connect. You'll also find more writing there about democratization, including that detailed description of the program I put together at Dropbox. And at least at this time of recording, I am officially open to work. So if your company wants to take democratization to the next level, please do get in touch. I hope this has been helpful for you. Good luck with your democratization efforts, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you so much.